There's no good guide for Mirage. Sure, you can watch high level play, but dude, a guide is going to do you some good if you actually want to get good at this character. For my credentials, about a fourth of my 500 plus games are with Mirage. I have over 444 hours in the game as of me writing this script, and I constantly do 1v1s with friends to sharpen my edge on Mirage. Not to mention my build that I'm going to recommend has been tested, tweaked, and almost perfected by yours truly. And since I always play Mirage, expect it to always be up to date. Further without ado, let's go. If you're watching this, you want to get good at Mirage, which means you should already know what his abilities do prior to watching the video, but because some of you are silly and may have just clicked on the first Mirage video you've seen, I'll explain it a little bit anyways, and how to best use them. Anyone who's already decent at Mirage should know a lot of these, but I'd still say it's worth a watch. What Tornado does is basically you turn to a tornado and you move forward a little bit and lift heroes in your path. Don't be fooled, this ability should never ever be used for initiation. If you think this is Mirage's strongest ability, I want you to wipe your brain clean because it is not. If you are using this incorrectly, you're already way behind my Mirage. So get it out of your skull that this is an initiation ability. It is not. Too many times I've seen the poor Mirage use it to initiate a fight only to lead them to death. I've killed many Mirages for such a mistake. Don't listen to what people tell you. Mirage is not a tank also. Unless you deliberately build him that way, have fun doing 0 damage and still not being as tanky as Abrams or Mo. Tornado is best used as a follow-up and escape tool. In fact, it's going to be an escape tool 80% of the time, yet you should use it. Mirage is not very fast, but this one silly ability has gotten me out of many sticky situations, as it not only boosts you forward, but for about half second it removes you from the game, giving you basically iframes. Meaning if you time it right, you can dodge 7 stuns, beat bop bombs, and even a lash out of his death slam post-ult if you aim it correctly. I'll go over more about hero versus hero specifics later, but for now, just know even if you're stunned by an Abrams and survive the initial burst damage, you can use this to escape while lifting him, meaning it gives you more time to create space between you and an enemy. This is one of, if not the best, escape ability in the game. It's also good in a team fight. After big ults like Abrams, Lash, or Dynamo, which tend to stun the enemies, you can follow it up with one of these to increase the amount of time that they are stunned, in air quotes. But always keep in mind using this ability is a commitment. It has a very long punishing cooldown. Make sure whether you're escaping or fighting, that is the perfect time to use it. Wasting this ability is a good way to get killed or allow a potential kill to escape you. Fire Scarabs. You throw out these little scarabs, you can throw up to 4, and basically they steal max health from enemies and give it to you, and it's 3 times as effective on heroes, but does not stack. This ability is alright. Its strength during laning phase is tremendous, especially when combined with a tech I'll show you later in this video. However, mid to late game, this ability is honestly best to use as you would a heal. It can deny enemies a kill on you, as if you're on the cusp of dying, spamming this on all the heroes can actually give you a good couple shots or two that would have been lethal. Its utility doesn't necessarily come from its damage, but more so with the fact that after being hit, enemies are in a more vulnerable state. Their max health is lower and they take more bullet damage. It can turn around a fight, but don't really rely on it for its damage. It's best used defensively or mid-team fight so your allies who do a lot of bullet damage can rack up more damage on the enemies. But yeah, not too much to say. Just don't be afraid to spam it a lot. I know it's got kind of a long cooldown, but you should definitely be using this to farm camps quicker because its burst damage is nothing to it's nothing to gawk at, but it's nothing that can be ignored. Jin's Mark. This right here is actually Mirage's best ability. Way better than Tornado. Mirage noobs think that his Tornado is probably the strongest part of his kit, but true Mirage chads know this ability is the reason you're winning games and topping damage charts. I see too many Mirage builds build close range and max fire rate, which is fine. That's actually what I did when I first started playing the hero, but Mirage's true status is as a mid to long range fighter. That's right, Mirage is not a brawler, even though 2 of his abilities might make you think he is, or 3. He is in fact more of a sniper character, akin to Geist or Vindicta, or a great talent in a sense. He doesn't need to land every shot to kill you, just the ones that increase his marks. This should be the very first ability you max as soon as possible. I don't even put points in any other ability until this one is completely maxed out, as it's what wins you lanes. It forces enemies to play safe at all times when you are around. Just you having this ability is a massive threat to enemies around you. Anytime an enemy decides to be aggressive, they risk getting more marks above their character. Any enemy who doubts the amount of damage this ability will do will quickly learn its effects after you buy items like Mystic Burst and Extra Spirit. This supercharges your stacks if you manage getting ×4 on anyone in a laning stage. Enjoy watching as half their health goes down, as they cannot do anything about it since you're usually a mile away if you build correctly. You can focus CS and farm, and all you gotta do is just make sure you click on an enemy hero in lane whenever they're ready for another one of your marks. They will be forced to either play so safe they miss out on valuable farm, or just take chunks of their health every couple seconds. And that is just your early game. Mid to late game is actually where Mirage falls off. He's like a reverse bell curve. He's very strong early and very strong late game, but mid game he's kind of a there character. He exists, but he doesn't really do much. But even mid to late game, you usually want to hang in the back of team fights, as the enemy will be so preoccupied with fighting your brawlers and tanks, they usually will fail to notice the big number above their head getting bigger and bigger until it's too late. They'll already be dead and not even know it until you click your silly little 3 button. Traveler is one of the most underrated abilities. I think a lot of people are in belief it's only useful for early game jumping low health people, because everyone knows late game if you try and use this as a gank, you're just going to get jumped on since everyone has a bunch of move speed. However, what people fail to realize is this is one of the best positioning tools in the game, possibly rivaling that of Ivy's ult, I'd say. Early game, this makes ganks easy mode, of course, you already know this, but I only really gank with it after taking my enemy's guardian to not risk me losing mine first. You see, Mirage is a bodyguard, which means you should be dying as little as possible. Mirage needs a lot of money to come back in that reverse bell curve I was talking about. You want to avoid dying with this character as much as possible. However, mid-game it can be used to help 2v2s into 3v2s, or 2 enemies ganking your ally turn into a fair 2v2. You can join in fights anywhere on the map, not to mention it means you can participate in a fight while farming camps, as you are just one button away from arriving, meaning your team cannot yell at you for AFK farming, since you're just one ult away from helping your team. Not to mention its ability as an escape tool, as long as your teammates are alive, can help keep wave fixed in your favor. If an enemy's jump on you, as long as you get enough distance, you can use this to make a quick getaway. It's saved my ass on many occasions. But if an enemy's pushing a lane, you can use it to go over there, and since it gives you bonus move speed, you can get enough space between you and the enemy you teleport onto, unless it's a Yamato, to clear the wave quickly and prevent your walker from being taken. Although it's not the most game-changing ult like Dynamo's or impactful, its uses of map control and turning fights around can't be dismissed, so don't forget you have this ability after the early game. I don't want to go too much into builds just because I already have a build made. Building for Mirage can be a little bit difficult as not many players really know how to play this character. I've seen builds for fire rate, builds for move speed. Honestly, just use my build. It's called DeadHatz Mirage Special. You'll be playing the backline and only the backline. You only really want to get close if the fight is already in your favor or you need to chase someone to secure a kill with Tornado, assuming your team is chasing down the last enemy survivor of the team fight. Getting frontline with Mirage, even with your scarabs, is almost always going to get you killed though. This build highly favors 1v1 or 2v1 interactions, and although 1v2s can be difficult, since you only really can target one player at a time, once you acquire Ricochet with this build, it allows you to go from a 1v1 master to a 1v6 master, as you can hit the entire enemy team with marks, meaning that if they stick too close together, it can net more and more stacks of marks, meaning more chances for them to die and take massive burst damage. Anyone who's played the game knows if you build too much space in the middle of a team fight between your allies, you have a chance of getting picked off by someone who feasts on backline enemies. Ricochet is by far the best out of Mirage, seconded only by Toxic Bullets. It allows tanky ganks or lifesteal heavy heroes who gank you to falter, as their health will melt away in a 1v1 at most times. The enemy can often be deceived into thinking they're winning a fight without realizing that the ×8 above their head, combined with improved burst and spirit, means they've already lost the fight, they just haven't realized it yet. Not to mention they're going to have trouble healing it up if you have Toxic Bullets. Mirage's ability to deceive enemies who think they've won the fight is actually one of his best unofficial passive abilities. The enemy has no idea how much damage they're about to take, usually before it's too late because of your marks, and this build helps build around that while also keeping your bullet damage dangerous, meaning they can't ignore it too much and just burst you down before your ×8 kills them. Although it doesn't get too into it with bullet damage, even though that can rack up a lot of nice damage, you're still splitting items between that and spirit, but your spirit items is what's going to be melting the item. Once you pick up Boundless Spirit, this makes a ×8 go from losing a chunk of health to straight up half a health, depending on the enemies. If it's a really squishy heroes, I've straight up killed Infernuses who were almost full health with a ×8 with Boundless Spirit and improved burst. The amount of times a Great Talon also has pushed on me thinking it would be an easy kill, only to be one shot at half health with a ×8 is more than I can count. Now let's go over the different phases of the game and how you should be playing them. Early to laning phase, whether it's a 2v2 or 1v1 lane, Mirage is pretty much putting the enemy on a time limit. If they don't stop the lane or control the lane by the time you get long range, assuming you're building in order of my build, then they can kiss any chances of winning that lane goodbye unless they have the assistance of other lanes ganking. All you gotta do is just click on the enemy's head. Since Mirage has very strong early game headshot damage, combined with your marks, you can easily pressure enemies from safety of any distance as long as you have hit your long shots. Even if they poke their heads around a corner, it can mean nothing. Now, if an enemy does start getting the upper hand, I recommend buying Decay, as it can cripple brawlers and do big fat damage to squishy heroes, forcing them to play very safe. As early game, if an enemy closes the gap on you, it can often be a death sentence. This item can help scare them off from doing that. Not to mention heroes who can displace you like Bebop and Abrams can be avoided if caught out if you time your tornado right, which early game you should be using 80% of the time only defensively as an escape tool in the laning phase. Also keep in mind, once your ultimate is acquired, you should be eyeing those health bars at the top of the screen for easy ganks. And look, this is easier if you're in a 2v2 lane, as your duel can help ensure your guardian isn't taken while you're gone. Although in a 1v1 it can be risky because the enemy can punish your leave by taking your guardian. That's why if you're in a 1v1, it's smart to get a kill on the enemy real quick before you teleport, that way they can't punish your absence immediately after you ult away. Mid game is when Mirage is actually at his weakest. This is because a lot more team fights start to happen and Mirage is more of a 1v1 hero early game. It's around the time that most of the Guardians have been taken and people are starting to push walkers. This is where you slowly build up taking winning or defensive fights until you get Ricochet. One of your most important things as Mirage is to not die. Any time wasted waiting to respawn and gold lost, or souls lost waiting to respawn, is only going to delay that bell curve as Mirage gets only stronger again when he has his items. You have to be picky about your fights even if your team is yelling at you. Although Mirage is strong, early game can make you think you can take fights you can't. It's important only fights you know you have a 100% chance of winning. Otherwise, you might as well be shooting peas at the enemy during the late game. Ricochet is a must focus item, but only get it after your key items if you're using my build. Trust me, I used to do a rush Ricochet build and it never worked out. Your ult can also be used to help reinforce teammates when enemies are pushing or help a split push lane to pretty much guarantee walkers. If you see a haze after a team fight shoving a lane by herself, you can almost guarantee a walker if you go with her. Late game usually begins around the time you've acquired Ricochet. Play around your team and do not take bad fights, even if you know your team will be mad at you. You can defend pushes actually quite easy because you have Ricochet. It allows you to threaten a large amount of damage on enemies who are pushing, just for simply standing near creeps. Your ult is going to be used more for key positioning rather than ganking enemies, such as teleporting to fights you may be missing out on, or locating yourself mid-fight to the back of a fight. Items like Siphon Bullets or Titanic Magazine allow you to not only maintain pressure but get stronger the longer the fight goes on. And thanks to Ricochet, Mirage excels in long-winded team fights as it allows them to build hit marks up, which means enemies will take massive amounts of damage the longer they stay in the fight. And of course, by this point you've bought Sharpshooter. If you're using my build, it means you can maintain good damage while staying a good distance away from AoEs being thrown around in battle. Greed items I like to get are Inhibitor, Crippling Headshot, and if your aim is good, these can force enemies to always commit to fights as you can run them down if they even try to escape. The enemy is left to trying desperately to escape the fight or fighting a losing battle, which of course goes in your favor. Now this is where we get a bit nerdy. We're going to talk about matchups and techs, but first let's go over matchups. Oftentimes you'll be in a 1v1 battle with enemies, whether you gank them, they gank you, or it's just who you're laned against in a 1v1 lane. This is my feeling on how Mirage fares in battle against certain enemies. S tier meaning you have a great chance of winning and destroying them in lane or in ganks, and D tier meaning you must play very carefully and cautiously, because they can easily take advantage of any mistakes you might make. Of course, these can change depending on how future balance street, and also it can always change depending on if the enemy's more farmed than you, but this is assuming you're both on equal footing. Over in S tier, we have Dynamo, Mo, Geist, Great Talon, and Shiv. Dynamo and Mo are very big heroes, meaning you're almost guaranteed to get a lot of stacks in them. Even if they're a little tanky, after only a couple times 4s, they're going to be brought down to lower health. And since there aren't Abrams, they actually don't have that strong of a gap closer, and they can't take as much damage as him. While Geist and Shiv both have abilities that require close range, such as Geist's ult and Shiv's everything, as long as you maintain distance, it is the easiest win possible. Great Talon is also so squishy that even if he gets some damage on you, only 2 to 3 4 stacks early game or even 1 8 stack are enough needed to kill him. If you place too safe, he's not likely to get much damage off you. And if you place too aggressive, you're going to get a lot of damage off on him. Over in A tier we have Infernus, 7, Wraith, Haze, and Vindicta. Infernus and Haze are trickier, but due to their squishiness and lack of health early game, the same rule applies to the Great Talon, where if they get too cocky, they can easily result in easy kills. However, the reason they're ranked at A and not S is because the amount of damage they can output is much quicker than a Great Talon's. They can easily get you from 100 to 0% health in a matter of seconds if you're not paying attention. But for the most part, they're very easy matchups. 7 and Wraith and Vindicta are all squishy. They have many abilities that can lock you down though. A well-timed tornado can avoid almost all of them, but one bad tornado or a bad play can still result in your death if you're not careful. But for the most part, the fight is in your favor because you can maintain distance. Over in B tier we have Ivy, Abrams, Bebop, Paradox, and Pocket. Bebop, Abrams, Pocket, and Paradox all have incredible gap closing and survivability. Getting hooked by Bebop is often a death sentence for other characters, and it is a death sentence for you if you don't have Tornado up, but if you do use it to escape a hook, you can actually avoid his backwards uppercut tech that I've seen recently. But if he manages to throw a bomb on you after tornadoing away, just be aware you are going to take bomb damage. And if you manage to tornado ray before it bombs you, then that means you can get away without taking any bomb damage. Abrams is usually a shutdown if you just rush Decay after, I would say, Mystic Burst. But since you're squishier early game, he can easily burst you down if you're not careful if he manages to pin you against a wall. It's best to play as safe as possible, as Abrams are king of punishing bad positioning, but as long as you play the safe lane, it's usually in your favor. As for Ivy, her Gargoyle form can straight up deny Jin Mark damage, which is your main source of harass. However, it does leave her vulnerable for a tornado right after it ends, so keep that in mind. Additionally, Paradox's wall can straight up negate your bullets, which is why I put her here. It can be very difficult to build marks on her because of that, not to mention a well-placed swap can put you in a bad positioning. Luckily, she is pretty squishy, so if you manage to do a lot of marks on her, you can punish her out of lane. In C tier I have Kelvin, Lash, McGinnis, and Viscous. A lane against Kelvin is pretty much an automatic decay game. It's a must-have because his heal is quite strong. Not to mention his slow makes an already slow hero slower and slows your fire rate. Not to mention because of his survivability, although he can't do as much damage for you, in a long battle he is going to eventually kill you because your heals are not as strong as his heals. He can stay alive longer than you, and that's all he needs to do to eventually kill you. So it's very key to buy Decay and eventually Toxic Bullets, which turns Kevin into a big fat baby. Lash and McGinnis are very good at punishing bad positioning. I would say Lash is actually better than Abrams, so I'm going to take the king remark away and give it to Lash. If you're out of position for a second, he can get some massive damage on you with a nice death slam, and McGinnis can wall you off. So it's very important that you keep large amounts of space between these two heroes. Viscous might seem a little confusing. He's very easy to hit headshots on and often can be easy to win lane against, but a good Viscous can close the gap between you very easily, which is where you're at your weakest, meaning that your range isn't always going to save you or guaranteed to save you against a Viscous. Key positioning is a must-have against all these heroes to avoid death. If you get that down, then the lane is still very much winnable. Also, keep in mind how I said earlier, in laning phase, the enemy basically has a time limit to beat you before they lose. McGinnis is troublesome because she can force push lanes, meaning that lane time limit is very achievable for her. I talked about earlier, but if you manage to focus creeps or turrets and not her as much, you can easily keep a lane defended long enough for you to get your farm to get easy picks off her. D is Warden and Yamato. Yamato is a pushover, but once she has ult, she can force prolonged fights where you won't do substantial damage for the duration of her ult, meaning it's best to avoid her when she's in shadow form rather than man up and fight, unless you have a team with you, of course. As for Warden, since every single Warden buys slowing hex, you cannot rely on your tornado to get away, so if he ganks you, it can almost be a death sentence. It's best to maintain high amounts of stamina if you know a Warden is nearby. Not to mention his Spirit Shield ability and ability to slow your fire rates mean he can avoid a lot of the damage and pressure you can do as a Mirage. Not to mention both heroes can easily punish you if you're out of position. Commit way too much in a fight against these two and it'll always net in death. Play safely when against these two, as their ability to punish bad mistakes and even the smallest of mistakes is second to none when you're playing Mirage. There's some basic techs. Mirage doesn't have any crazy techs, he's not the flashiest crazies here to play, but there are some techs I've learned. I've placed this from easiest to do or memorize from hardest. He doesn't have any crazy on, and a lot of these are just kind of common sense. One is tornado dropping. So one thing I noticed is Mirage's tornado, when used off a ledge or high ground, travels downward very quickly. This isn't a tech, but more so a knowledge, but if a fight is on a rooftop, let's say you're climbing up a rooftop to get away, you can use tornado to quickly get to the other side of the rooftop and drop down on the floor quicker. And if you had enough distance, by the time the enemies reach the roof, you'll be out of sight, giving you time to hide or teleport away. It can be also very disorienting if the enemy doesn't know what side of the roof you drop down on. Number 2 is dodgeables and tornado counterplay. I have a list against Mirage on every current hero in the game and how his tornado counterplays against it, so we'll start from the top. Just keep in mind, a lot of these take good timing and practice. You're not going to have a lot of them down off the brim. Number 1 is Abrams. If Abrams is charging you, if you face him during a tornado, you can actually interrupt his charge, lifting him in the air. Also, if you time it right and guess when he's coming down, you can actually avoid his ult's massive stun radius. 2 is Bebop. Bebop's bomb damage, like I said earlier, can be avoided, and if you're grabbed, you can tornado away before he does a reverse uppercut attack. Dynamo doesn't have anything crazy to avoid. However, if he has Refresher ult, I noticed that because he has to use Refresher, there's a small window you can teleport away between ults if you're caught in the first one. Great Talon's ult can be avoided right before explosion if you can predict when he's about to make it explode. Haze can have her move speed locked in one spot because she'll be lifted in the air, and ult pretty much avoided if you're caught within it if you tornado her mid-ult. Just be wary of Hazes who buy silence during ult, as it can shut down your tornado. Infernus's ult can't be interrupted even if you use knockdown, I'm pretty sure. However, if you time your tornado, you can actually stop him running to you or your team, while also avoiding the stun if you time it just right. Ivy's bomb is kind of hard since it's more of a wave effect, the same thing with Pocket's ult, but her gargoyle form leaves her open for tornado once it wears off if she does use the gargoyle form. Kelvin's beam can be avoided if you tornado out of line of sight. Additionally, although quite hard, you can use a tornado to buy yourself half a second of time if you're in his ult. A good tornado can easily avoid a Geist bomb, but usually I would use stamina on that. Although, if she is getting really close to you and closing the gap to ult you, if she's running in a straight line and you tornado through her, it can lift you and give you more distance to get away from her, and while she's lifted, you can get a good mark shot off and usually kill her because she's only going to ult you if she's low on health. Lash's Death Slam can actually be avoided easily by hitting him mid-air with the tornado. This works best after his ult, as denying him the Death Slam damage after his ult means that you can save you and your teammates a lot of incoming burst damage, and also have Lash up for grabs. A McGinnis wall can be avoided if you tornado right as she's about to place it behind you. The tornado moves so fast, by the time she places it, you'll actually end up being on the other side. Other than that, there's not really too much to do here. Mullen Krill doesn't really have any attacks that you need to avoid with the tornado. If you're going to get ulted, you're going to get ulted, but I have noticed that if he's using a spin attack to hit your team, you can use a tornado to lock him into place, allowing you and your teammates to escape his radius of damage. Paradox's Time Wall can actually be tornadoed through it without receiving the damage or silence that comes with passing through it. Pocket's ult is almost impossible to escape from. I've really tried timing with the tornado, but I haven't succeeded. But I do believe it is possible to actually avoid getting hit by Pocket's ult if you are timing it right. I haven't done it myself yet though. 7 stun can be avoided if timing right at the end when it's about to stun you, and Shiv players rely on getting close to you for pretty much all their abilities. And if you see a Shiv about to do a dash towards you, you can actually lift him mid-dash and avoid all of the damage, while also lifting him and giving him time to escape or do some damage to him. Additionally, also while very hard to time, you can straight up avoid his execution ability with a well-timed tornado, since you are invulnerable during the duration. Vindictive players caught in the tornado while mid-air means she cannot move to side, meaning she is pretty much a sitting duck in the air. It can also be used to avoid her leash. Viscous is a tough one, but actually Viscous's ball can be lifted, which will remove all momentum that the ball had during its run. It's very good if you see Viscous about to hit you and your team to lift him, and also give him an exposed, in the air effect for your team to quickly kill him if he's in ball form. As long as Warden doesn't have Slowing Hex, you can tornado out of the chain radius before you get rooted, but if he has Slowing Hex, you're going to have to rely on stamina for the most part. Wraith ult can also be avoided as long as you time your tornado right before the projectile hits you, meaning she will waste an entire ult and you can get away scot-free. Tornado is paramount when versing a Wraith ult, but if you pull it off, it means you can win lane easily against her because she loses her strongest ability. Yamato, there's actually not much you can really do against a Yamato because she just has a lot of debuff resistance built into her kit, and also it's very easy for her to close the gap on you. The only thing I could think of is if she hits you with her 2, which is usually going to be followed by 3, if your Tornado right as she's about to make contact, you can actually avoid the damage from her 3. Next is Scarab Mark Maxing. This is a really weird tech, and it might be a little hard to understand because it does have some math, but I'll do my best to explain it simply. Basically, you want to hit the enemies with beetles right before you're going to use any mark damage. This is because the enemy will have taken more damage from mark once they get their full health back after Scarab's duration ends. Let's say I have 100 HP and I take 50 HP from marks, I'll lose half my health, I'll be at 50% health. Let's say, for example, before I got hit by the mark, I get brought down to 70 max HP because Scarabs took my damage. I'll take the 50 damage and I'll be left at 20 out of 70 health, which is around 30% of my health left. When my health returns to its max amount, 100, I'll still maintain that 30% health left, meaning that instead of using mark to bring me to 50% health, because I will have gotten my health back after already taking that damage, it'll bring me to 30% of 100 max health, meaning that instead of being brought back at 50% health, I'll go back with 30 HP out of 100. Since that's around the same percentage as 20 out of 70 health. I don't know if I'm making complete sense with this, but just trust me, use Scarab before you do mark damage to enemy. It'll just slightly increase the total damage the enemy took, even if they manage to get their health back after Scarab's duration ends. Finally, Tornado Aerial. This is knowledge, not attack, but keep in mind your Tornado actually extends like a big beam in the sky. It is very tall, meaning you can immobilize mid-air enemies using it, and this will lock them in place, kind of like how I mentioned earlier for Vindicta, but this can also be used against Grey Talon, Kelvins, and Ivy players. Here is some of my best clips, putting my money where my mouth is and actually doing the shit I'm talking about in this video, and then after that the video will end. But yeah, good luck. If you guys learn and play how I told you, you'll learn how much of a monster this character can be in games. Good luck out there and make the Jin proud. For mitzvah.
Hope you win whatever fight you're about to start. Sustain.
Oh, goodbye.
Oh yeah, you might be dead. They kind of got you.
The double ult is insane. Hey, better me than you.
Game for been stuttery for anyone else since the fucking patch.
Did you get rid of that bebop? He's not nice.
You won't be bothering us for a while. I won't let you kill me. Sending tornado.
Oh, I almost got surrounded by him there. Holy shit.
Subscribe to DeadHatz or you'll die tomorrow.